What if the strongest move in an argument wasn't to speak louder, but to speak less? Imagine silencing an opponent not with fury, but with a calm that makes everyone in the room lean closer, waiting to see what you'll do next. Have you ever been attacked with words so sharp they could cut your skin? And yet, what if the real blade wasn't their insult but your composure? What if silence itself became your most devastating weapon? Picture this. Someone tries to humiliate you in front of everyone. The air grows heavy, your heart races, every eye is on you. Most people explode. But the wise? They don't fight fire with fire, they let the other person burn themselves out. Someone just said something that makes your blood boil. The words hit you like sparks landing on dry leaves, and the heat rises instantly. You feel your pulse in your throat, the tightness in your chest, and the urge, almost uncontrollable, to strike back. Every eye in the room is fixed on you, waiting, anticipating, hungry for your reaction. They want to see the explosion, the clash, the spectacle. Sharp words are right there, pressed against your lips, waiting to spill out like arrows released from a bow. You imagine how good it would feel to cut them down with logic, to fire back with a phrase so sharp it slices them open. But this exact moment, is where centuries of wisdom step in. This is when you remember a timeless lesson from the ancient masters. The wise don't win by shouting. They win with composure. The Stoics knew something we forget in the heat of battle. Reason is sharper than rage, and calmness cuts deeper than chaos. True strength is not the loudest voice in the room, but the quietest one that refuses to be shaken. They understood that the loudest fighter often reveals desperation, while the composed one controls the entire battlefield without lifting a sword. This isn't about backing down. It isn't cowardice, and it certainly isn't weakness. It's about claiming the highest form of power, the ability to govern yourself when provoked. Because if you can't master your own emotions, how can you ever hope to master the situation? I'm not here to teach you cheap comebacks, or the art of verbal sparring that leaves your opponent humiliated, but you secretly drained. No. I'm here to show you something far more enduring. How to end conflict with elegance. How to protect your dignity. And sometimes, yes, even how to turn an enemy into an unexpected ally. Imagine leaving a confrontation not with regret, but with respect, earned not by force, but by wisdom. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "The best answer to anger is intentional silence." Think about that. Not indifference, not avoidance, intentional silence. A weapon so disarming it exposes the other person's weakness without you having to say a word. That's why today, I want to share with you 5 clever Stoic responses that have been used for over 2,000 years. These responses don't just silence an aggressor. They shift the balance of power completely in your favor. And pay attention, because response number 3, it is especially powerful. It transforms their attack into self-exposure, forcing them to reveal more about their insecurity than about you. It's like turning their own blade back toward them, but without ever lifting your hand. So stick around. And before we dive in, hit that subscribe button. Because the truth is, wisdom like this doesn't just help you win arguments. It helps you win yourself. And when you win yourself, no one else can defeat you. Response number 1. I see your point. Help me understand your reasoning. The most powerful weapon against aggression is not a sword, not fists, not even words sharper than theirs. It's genuine curiosity. When someone attacks your ideas or your character, they expect one of 2 reactions: defense or counterattack. They're ready for you to raise your shield or to draw your sword. But what they never expect is for you to lower your guard and lean in closer, saying, I see your point. Help me understand your reasoning. This simple shift disarms them completely. Why? Because they've prepared themselves mentally for a battle, not a conversation. They came loaded with emotion, but you respond with reason. They came ready to throw fire, but you respond with water. And just like that, the ground beneath them begins to shake. I'll never forget a tense team meeting from a few years ago. I had poured weeks of work into a project proposal, late nights, endless research, consultations with experts. Finally, I presented it to the team. Halfway through, a colleague suddenly cut in, his voice sharp, his words like daggers. "You're completely out of touch with reality. It's clear you don't understand anything about the current market." Instantly, my blood boiled. I felt my face burn red, my heart pounding against my ribs. My instinct screamed at me, "Defend yourself, prove him wrong, list every source, every expert, every shred of research." But instead, I remembered the lesson. I took a deep breath and calmly replied, "I see your point, David. Can you help me understand your reasoning? Which specific aspects seem unrealistic to you?" The room went silent. All eyes shifted from me to David, and then something remarkable happened. He stumbled. He hesitated. He fumbled for words. Well, generally, he had nothing concrete to back his claim. Eventually, under the weight of silence, he admitted he hadn't read the entire proposal carefully and was just reacting on gut instinct. That moment taught me something I've never forgotten. When you force someone to move from emotional reaction to logical explanation, most cannot follow. They throw around vague words, unrealistic, naive, uninformed. But when you press gently for specifics, their foundation often collapses. This isn't just clever strategy. It's philosophy. It's the method Socrates mastered, the same Socrates the Stoics deeply admired. He once said, "The only true wisdom is knowing you know nothing." And by inviting others to explain, you don't humiliate them. You allow the truth to reveal itself. We just saw how the first response shifts the balance, turning an emotional attack into an opportunity for reason. Now let's go deeper into why this method works so effectively. This response embodies true humility. You admit, at least in theory, that maybe you've overlooked something, and you show a real willingness to learn. But here's the genius. While your words sound humble, they also shine a quiet light on the other person's lack of preparation, without you ever raising your voice or being aggressive. Instead of staying pinned as the target, you suddenly become the one guiding the entire conversation. Think about it. Rather than being forced into a defensive corner, you've subtly taken control by asking a single calm question. In that moment, the burden shifts. They now have to prove their point, while you no longer have to defend yours. And this shift is more than tactical, it's psychological. When people lash out with criticism, most of the time they're not drawing from logic or careful thought. They're reacting impulsively from emotion. By asking them to explain, you force them to move from their emotional brain into their rational mind. And very often, that shift exposes the emptiness of their attack. That's why this response works best against vague accusations or shallow criticism. But there's a golden rule here. Your tone matters more than your words. You must be genuine. If you sound sarcastic, mocking, or condescending, the effect collapses instantly. The magic of this method lies in sincerity. You must truly sound as if you want to understand. Picture yourself leaning in slightly, speaking as if you're genuinely curious. "I see your point. Can you help me understand your reasoning?" The sincerity disarms them. But if you say it with a smirk or with a tone dripping with irony, it backfires. They'll feel attacked, and the conflict escalates instead of dissolving. This is especially powerful when dealing with people who love to criticize but hate being forced to explain themselves. You know the type, those who toss quick judgments like darts, but when asked to back it up with facts, suddenly can't find their footing. In group settings, this response becomes even more effective, because now the entire room witnesses the dynamic shift. Either the critic produces valid reasoning, or they reveal themselves as someone simply being difficult. And either way, you remain calm, composed, and dignified. The beauty of this technique is that you're not attacking them back. You're not trading insult for insult. You're not even defending yourself. You're simply inviting them to stand behind their own words. You give them the chance to either contribute something meaningful or expose that they had nothing of substance in the first place. But here's the interesting twist. Sometimes, when you invite explanation, you'll find that they actually do have a valid point. They might bring up a flaw you hadn't noticed, or a concern that truly deserves attention. And that's when we turn to our second response. Response number 2. You're absolutely right. And here's what I'm going to do about it. Sometimes, the quickest way to win is not to resist, but to yield strategically. When someone points out a real mistake, instead of scrambling for excuses, you take ownership. You acknowledge it plainly, and then, most importantly, you announce your plan to fix it. In that moment, you strip them of all their ammunition. They can no longer attack, because you've already taken responsibility and moved straight to resolution. I'll never forget a moment during a client meeting. We had been working with this client for about 6 months, and they had noticed a pattern they were not happy with. In front of my entire team, the client looked at me and said bluntly, "Your team has missed the deadline again. This is becoming a serious problem, and frankly, it's shaking our confidence in your ability to deliver." The tension was thick. I could feel my team shifting uneasily in their seats. I knew they were expecting me to jump into defense mode, to explain the scope changes, the technical setbacks, the lack of resources. And truthfully, we did have valid reasons. But instead of going down that predictable path, I looked straight at the client and calmly said, "You're absolutely right. And here's what I'm going to do about it." We saw how immediately owning a valid criticism and presenting clear steps forward can completely shift the tone of a conversation. Now let's look at how that unfolded in practice. I told the client, "I'm implementing a new project tracking system this week that will give us better visibility into potential delays. I'll also be sending you weekly progress updates every Friday, so you'll never be surprised again. And for this current project, I'm personally taking ownership to ensure we deliver by the revised deadline we set today." The change in the atmosphere was almost instant. The client's defensive posture softened, their voice lowered, and instead of continuing to press us about our past mistakes, they began asking constructive questions about the new system. The entire energy of the room shifted, from confrontation to collaboration. What started as an attack on our reliability turned into a productive discussion about how to improve. This works because, at the heart of criticism, people usually want one of two things. Either they want to see you squirm, making excuses and stumbling through justifications, which only proves they were right to doubt you. Or they want to see you take the issue seriously and move to fix it. When you choose the second option right away, without hesitation, you transform criticism into cooperation. The psychological effect is powerful. Most people expect resistance when they bring up problems. They expect a wall of explanations, maybe even blame shifting. They are mentally prepared for a fight. But when instead you own the issue completely and immediately offer concrete steps, you catch them off guard in the best possible way. Instead of hostility, they feel respect. Instead of doubt, they see maturity. Epictetus once taught, "Don't explain your philosophy. Embody it." And that's exactly what this response does. Taking responsibility in the moment embodies wisdom and strength better than any argument ever could. It shows that your priority is not protecting your ego, but actually solving the problem in front of you. But there is an important caveat. This response should only be used when the criticism is truly valid. If someone is making unfair accusations or blaming you for things beyond your control, then this approach would be misplaced. The power of this technique comes specifically from the fact that you're willing to accept reality and act on it immediately. When, and only when, you genuinely are at fault. What makes this so disarming is that it strips away the critic's entire reason for being upset. After all, they raised the issue because they wanted a solution. And when you commit instantly to fixing it, they get exactly what they were looking for. There's nothing left to fight about. The tension dissolves, because the purpose of the confrontation has already been met. This response has a way of turning critics into collaborators almost instantly. Instead of being adversaries locked in battle over whether a problem exists, you suddenly become partners working side by side to solve it. And sometimes, the very person who was criticizing you ends up becoming your strongest supporter, because you prove that you listen, you care, and you act. But here's the reality. Not all attacks are based on legitimate concerns. Some people don't want solutions. They don't want progress. They simply want to provoke you, to poke at you, to spark a reaction for their own satisfaction. And when you encounter this type of attack, a completely different strategy is required, which brings us to our third response. Response number 3. That's an interesting perspective. What made you think of it? The most elegant way to silence someone isn't to shut them down with force. It's to calmly invite them to reveal themselves. When someone makes a provocative or insulting comment, you meet it not with anger but with measured curiosity. You don't mirror their aggression. You hold up a mirror instead. This forces them into a corner. Either they admit they were being unreasonable, or they dig themselves deeper into an indefensible position. Either way, the spotlight shifts from you to them. I witnessed this masterfully executed at a dinner party last year. A friend of mine, let's call her Rachel, works as a freelance graphic designer. Over the past decade, she's built a thriving business through persistence and creativity. She's calm, confident, and not easily shaken. We saw how Rachel used calm curiosity to handle a provocative remark at the dinner table. Let's take a closer look at how her response turned the entire situation upside down. That evening, a man she had just met leaned back in his chair and, with a smirk, threw out a cutting remark. Freelancing must be nice. Basically getting paid to play around on a computer all day without any real responsibility. The words were sharp, dripping with condescension. Everyone at the table felt the sting of it. The insult hung in the air like smoke, heavy and uncomfortable. Rachel could easily have taken the bait. She could have gotten defensive, rattled off her credentials, listed her impressive client base, or described the countless long hours she put into her work. That would have been the expected response, but instead, she chose something entirely different. With a genuine, almost warm smile, she looked at him and said calmly, "That's an interesting perspective." "What made you think of that?" The effect was immediate. The man froze, caught off guard. He had been expecting resistance, maybe even anger, but curiosity? He stammered, fumbling for words. "Well, it seems like..." His voice trailed off as he struggled to find anything that didn't make him sound petty or ignorant. Finally, with a sheepish look, he admitted, "I guess I don't really know what freelance design work involves." And just like that, the entire table witnessed the truth. In one swift moment, he revealed his own ignorance and prejudice, without Rachel ever having to raise her voice. That's what makes this response so brilliant. On the surface, it appears innocent, even genuinely interested. But beneath that calm exterior, it subtly exposes the other person's lack of substance or their hidden motivations. They thought they were landing a blow on you, but in reality, they ended up striking themselves. You've given them just enough rope, and they used it exactly as you knew they would. The beauty lies in its apparent innocence. You're not sarcastic. You're not confrontational. To everyone watching, you sound like someone sincerely curious about how the other person formed their opinion. But psychologically, you're forcing them to stop and examine their own thought process. And most provocative comments simply cannot survive under that kind of scrutiny. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "The best revenge is not to be like your enemy." This response embodies that wisdom perfectly. While they try to drag you down to their level of small-mindedness, you remain composed, curious, and dignified. The contrast becomes visible to everyone around. The key, however, is in your tone. You must sound genuinely curious, not mocking. If you deliver the line with even the slightest hint of sarcasm, it turns into an attack, and the effect is lost. But when spoken sincerely, it's devastatingly effective, especially against people who make assumptions without facts, or who speak from prejudice rather than knowledge. And here's why it's so powerful. This works anywhere. Professional settings, casual social gatherings, even awkward family dinners where someone lets slip an inappropriate comment. In every one of those situations, the outcome is usually one of two things. Either the person realizes they've been unfair and apologizes, or they double down and expose themselves further. Either way, you win without ever raising your voice. Most people who make provocative remarks haven't actually thought through why they said what they said. They're speaking from emotion, from assumption, from some unexamined bias, and when you ask them calmly and sincerely to explain their reasoning, they often discover, sometimes to their own embarrassment, that they have none. But occasionally, you'll run into someone different, someone who won't be swayed by curiosity, logic, or even the exposure of their own weak reasoning. They're determined to be difficult no matter how gracefully you respond. And when that happens, you'll need a completely different approach, which brings us to our fourth response. Response number 4. I appreciate you sharing that with me. Nothing disarms hostility quite like unexpected gratitude. When faced with insults, complaints, or sharp criticism, responding with sincere appreciation for their honesty shifts the dynamic instantly. The conversation transforms from confrontation into dialogue, often leaving the other person uncertain about whether to continue their aggression. This approach saved me from what could have been a nightmare situation with my neighbor about 2 years ago. We introduced the power of unexpected gratitude. Now let me show you how this response saved me from what could have been a nightmare situation with my neighbor. At the time, I had recently adopted a rescue dog. He was still adjusting to his new environment, and apparently while I was away at work in the mornings, he barked non-stop. I had no idea this was happening until one evening, as I was checking my mail, my neighbor stormed across the yard. His face was red with frustration and he shouted, "Your dog is driving the whole neighborhood crazy. He barks from 6 in the morning until you get home. It's completely inconsiderate, and frankly, some of us are thinking about calling animal control." My first instinct was to snap back. I wanted to explain that I had only just adopted the dog, that I was actively working on the issue, and that he could have approached me in a calmer, more civil way. My defenses rose instantly, like a wall ready to protect me. But in that split second, I caught myself. I took a breath, let the tension drain out of my shoulders, and instead said, "I really appreciate you sharing that with me. I honestly had no idea this was happening. And I'm genuinely glad you felt comfortable enough to tell me directly, rather than just letting the frustration build up." The transformation was immediate and dramatic. His clenched shoulders dropped, his voice softened, and suddenly we were no longer two adversaries facing off. We became two neighbors standing in the front yard trying to solve a common problem together. Instead of attacking, he started helping. He offered suggestions about dog training, shared stories about his own pets, and even recommended a local trainer who had helped his sister. By the end of the conversation, what began as an angry confrontation ended with us exchanging phone numbers so he could text me if the barking became an issue again. This response works because people almost always expect defensiveness when they bring complaints. In fact, they've often rehearsed the conversation in their head beforehand, imagining your excuses, bracing for your counterattack. When you respond with sincere gratitude instead, you completely derail their prepared script. It forces them to drop the fight and shift into a more collaborative mindset. The psychology here is profound. When someone lashes out with criticism, it's usually because they're frustrated, powerless, or overwhelmed. By thanking them for their honesty, you're doing two things at once. You acknowledge their feelings, and you treat them as someone whose opinion matters. That small act transforms them from an enemy into an unexpected partner who is helping you improve. Seneca once said, "Every new beginning comes from some other beginning's end." And that's exactly what happens here. This type of response ends the conflict and begins cooperation. It shows that you are secure enough in yourself to take feedback without spiraling into defensiveness, even when the feedback is delivered poorly. The key is to recognize the difference between someone who is genuinely trying to raise a valid concern, even if clumsily, and someone who simply wants to hurt you. This approach works best when the person's complaint has truth behind it, but their delivery is wrapped in frustration or rudeness. Your gratitude acknowledges their good intention while letting their poor delivery slide past without resistance. And here's what's truly remarkable. This response often brings out the best in people. When you treat someone as reasonable and well-intentioned, even if they didn't act that way at first, they often rise to meet the expectation you've set for them. That neighbor who came storming into my yard, shouting about my dog, eventually became one of my most helpful allies in solving the problem. And that's the lesson. You'll be amazed how quickly people's tone changes when they feel heard and appreciated instead of attacked or dismissed. Sometimes the difference between making an enemy and making an ally lies entirely in how you choose to respond. We saw how gratitude can transform an enemy into an ally. But what about those moments when no response seems to work? When someone is determined to be difficult, no matter how gracefully you handle yourself, that's when our final response becomes the most powerful of all. Response number 5, the silent pause, followed by "thank you for that insight." Sometimes, the most powerful answer is the one wrapped in silence. When someone says something outrageous, cruel, or deeply inappropriate, you don't rush to defend yourself. You don't argue. Instead, you pause. You hold their gaze. You let the weight of their words hang in the air for a few seconds, and then, in the calmest tone you can muster, you say, "Thank you for that insight." It is the pause that does most of the work. Those few seconds of silence force everyone present to fully absorb what was just said. The quiet turns their comment into a spotlight, magnifying its harshness. And your gracious, almost generous response creates a sharp contrast between their behavior and yours. I'll never forget a moment about 3 years ago when this very approach saved my reputation. I was presenting a new marketing strategy to a room filled with potential partners, including several of my competitors. The pitch was going smoothly until one competitor, clearly threatened by the direction of my ideas, decided to strike. Right in the middle of my explanation about market research, he interrupted with a smirk and said, "I'm not sure we can trust marketing advice from someone with such obviously limited experience in this field. Maybe we should hear from someone who actually knows what they're talking about." The room went dead silent. You could almost feel the sting of his words cutting through the air. Every person in that room could sense the aggression and inappropriateness of his comment. My blood surged. My instincts screamed to defend myself, to list my credentials, my years of experience, my successes, even to expose his own shortcomings. But instead, I stopped. I looked directly at him. For what felt like an eternity, though it was likely no more than 3 seconds, I held the silence. Then, with steady composure, I said, "Thank you for that insight." The silence that followed was deafening. His attack lingered in the air like an unpleasant odor that everyone could suddenly smell. People shifted uncomfortably in their seats. A few even looked embarrassed on his behalf. I didn't need to justify myself. I didn't need to fight. His own words, amplified by my pause and calm reply, revealed exactly what kind of person he was. From that moment, the rest of my presentation flowed smoothly. And afterward, several people approached me privately. They apologized for his behavior and told me how impressed they were with the way I had handled the situation. Later, when the committee made their decision, We secured the contract we were competing for, partly because they felt his unprofessional conduct disqualified him, while my composure demonstrated leadership. The pause is the heart of this technique. It creates space, a silence where their words echo, forcing everyone to examine them. In those few seconds, the audience has time to process what was really said and recognize just how inappropriate it was. Without the pause, your reply might sound automatic, maybe even sarcastic. But with it, you show absolute emotional control. And here's the crucial part: your words, "Thank you for that insight," must sound genuine, not mocking. The goal is not to humiliate, but to radiate composure so strong that their pettiness becomes glaring by comparison. By taking the high road so visibly, you make the difference in character between you and your critic impossible to ignore. Epictetus once said, "It's not what happens to you, but how you react to it that matters." This response embodies that wisdom completely. While they surrender to their worst impulses, you demonstrate mastery over yours. You show the discipline that true strength demands. And this technique is especially powerful in group settings. Because when others witness the contrast, your calm dignity set against someone else's aggression, the lesson becomes unforgettable. We saw how a pause and a calm "Thank you for that insight" can completely disarm aggression. But why does it work so well? Because it shifts the spotlight. It works because it makes their behavior, not their words, the center of attention. Suddenly, people stop analyzing whether the criticism itself had any real merit and start asking themselves, why would someone express it that way? The focus moves away from the content of their attack and onto the manner in which it was delivered. And very often, the person who tried to attack you is left feeling foolish, because they realize everyone in the room saw their true character exposed. Think about it. They prepared themselves for a fight. They rehearsed in their mind how you might get angry, raise your voice, or scramble to defend yourself. They were ready for you to justify their aggression. But when you respond with calm dignity, without a single insult, without one defensive word, you shrink their stature in front of everyone watching. You didn't have to tear them down. Their own behavior did it for you. That is what makes this response so profoundly effective. It embodies one of the core principles of Stoicism. You cannot control the actions of others, but you can always control your response to them. By choosing grace over retaliation, patience over reactivity, you show a kind of strength that commands genuine respect. And this is the common thread tying all 5 responses together. They help you stay in control of yourself while giving others the chance to reveal who they truly are. That, right there, is the real power of Stoic wisdom. It's not about winning arguments. It's about maintaining your dignity, no matter how others choose to behave. Arguments can come and go, but the impression you leave of your character, that lasts. Remember, the goal isn't to defeat people in conversation. The real goal is to protect your peace of mind and, whenever possible, to turn conflict into meaningful dialogue. Because when you respond with wisdom instead of raw emotion, you don't just win the moment, you often win lasting respect. And in many cases, you transform a potential confrontation into an opportunity for cooperation. The ancient Stoics understood this truth deeply. Our reactions define us far more than the events that trigger them. These 5 responses are living proof. They show that strength is not about having the loudest voice or the sharpest comeback. True strength lies in choosing grace, composure, and self-mastery under pressure. So if this video gave you confidence in how to handle difficult conversations, please give it a like so that others can discover and benefit from this wisdom too. And don't forget to subscribe to Life Through Stoicism, where we continue building the discipline of mind that earns both respect from others and peace within yourself. Because in the end, your responses reveal your character. And every time you respond, you're making a choice. So choose wisely.